This community founder Acharya and Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gantara Srimad Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Vivandi, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the Lord, Sri Guru and Sri Parama. So, looks like our young folks here are setting examples for the older folks. Thank you all. And ladies are coming. And the young gentleman over here, and here's his one right to participate. Thank you very much. So this, we chant this Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. It's Vasudevaya, means Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. And by chanting the name of Krishna, Vasudeva, one can achieve all good results, charity, prosperity, and penances. 3 things that are necessary in order to make spiritual advancements. So it's understood that by chanting this mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, that the author, or the speaker, or any one of the readers of Srimad Bhagavatam is offering respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the reservoir of all pleasure. And Prabhupada commented in the first canto, 1, 2, 11, that one who's actually interested in the Bhagavatam, therefore must not play with it by reading or hearing a portion here or there. One must follow the footsteps of great themes like Maharaj Amrish or Maharaj Krishna, and hear it from a bona fide representative of Shri Krishna. This was in a conversation between Vinod and Victoria. Of course, we've also heard that, wherever you can read from any point, but if you follow from the first, and you're hearing from someone who has heard from a bona fide representative, then advancement is assured. One can grasp easily. So the servants of God, it's explaining how the servants of the Lord, they come to propagate God consciousness. And said that intelligent people should cooperate with them in every respect. So when we're speaking of intelligence, we're not speaking of these IQ intelligence. That's a type of intelligence. But here the intelligence is referring to your spiritual intelligence is not dependent on the IQ intelligence. Just like when Prabhupada first introduced the Maha mantras, anyone can chant, a child can chant, a dog can chant. It's not limited. So the Lord is more pleased when he sees that his servants are properly respected, because such servants risk everything to serve the Lord. They become very dear to the Lord. So in the case of the Bhagavatam, Sukadeva Goswami, he was sent to serve Maharaja Cricket at his time of death by revealing to him what a man who was about to die should do. And Cricket exhibited himself as a perfect student who was asking relevant questions. He was faithfully hearing the answers. And we have now, we're starting this part where Devahuti is asking questions. Not that she's about to die, but is this covered?
Yes.
So it's not that she's about to die. It's not that you have to wait till the moment of death or when death is impending to start inquiring. We should be inquiring from a very young childhood, like we see these kids here. They're inquiring. Everybody's inquiring one way or the other. The inquiry we're discussing is spiritual inquiry. And Devahuti, a glorious lady of the Bhagavatam, is inquiring. And Krishna has arranged the perfect person to answer her perfect questions. So it may look kind of, if you don't know what's coming down, you think, God, this woman's husband just left her. But yeah, he left her for a higher purpose, and he left behind his perfectly capable son, who was actually an incarnation of the Lord, to answer her questions and give her guidance. So it's not as dire as it may sound. One of my god sisters was extremely young when her husband took sannyas, and they discussed it really seriously before he did that. And she was barely 20 years old. And when they discussed it, and she agreed, yes, we have this one life, let's use it, let's try this out. And the mother of the husband, when she found out what had gone on, she goes up and she was chastising her son. So she was even calling him a rascal. What are you doing, Howie? His name was Howard. What are you doing? Get back to your life. So people who have not been spiritually trained, properly trained, they cannot understand these type of things. Where what is really the most important thing and how to do it. So here we're in chapter 25 and the verse is 24. It's a parody of it, something. So first, I'm going to word by word in the transliteration, and then we'll chant the verse. Taite, those very. Sadhava, devotees. Sadhavi, virtuous lady. Sarva, all. Sangha, attachment. Vivartitaha, freed from. Sangha, attachment. Deshu, unto them. Ta, hence. Te, by you. Partaya, must be sought. Samgadosha, the pernicious effects of material attachment. How many of you know what pernicious means? Okay, well, this is why it's a good idea sometimes when you're reading a Bhagavatam or any other Shastra, you know, either have a dictionary or have your phone that has a dictionary and look up these words. They're right there in the translation. And you're admitting you don't know what it means, but it must be kind of important because it's mentioned. So when something like that happens, look it up. There's many, including this Howie, who I was just telling you about, who took sannyasa at a very young age. He was one of these big-brained people, but he sat with the dictionary when he started reading these books because he wanted to understand what was being said. If you don't know what the words mean, how can you understand, you know? And also, Prabhupada Swami, the first book he ever got was Brahma Samhita. Can you imagine the first book? Yeah, somebody gave it to him, and he said he couldn't understand properly. Yeah, he had a dictionary, so every word I was having to look it up. But that way, he imbibed the understanding. So pernicious means deadly. The pernicious effects of material attachment. Sometimes it says, in other verses, it says the pernicious effects of Kali Yuga. Deadly. Hara, counter actors. He, indeed, te, they. Tate sadapa sadhi. Tate sadapa sadhi. Tate sadapa sadhi. Tate sadapa sadhi. Sarva Sangha Vivarjitaha. Sarva Sangha Vivarjitaha. Sarva Sangha Vivarjitaha. Sanghas Nishanta Te Prataya. Sanghas Nishanta Te Prataya. Sanghas Nishanta Te Prataya. Sanghadosha Harahite. Sanghadosha Harahite.
Sangadoshaharahite.
Jayate sadhava sadhvi.
Jayate sadhava sadhvi. Sarvasanga vivarjitaha. Sangastesha pariragyaha. Sangadoshaharahite. Jayate sadhava sadhvi. Sarvasanga vivarjitaha. Sangastesha pariragyaha. Sangadoshaharahite.
The translation. O my mother, O virtuous lady. So the word that they were here, the sadhvi, virtuous lady. These are the qualities of great devotees who are free from all attachment. You seek attachment to such holy men, for this counteracts the pernicious effects of material attachment. So in the previous verses, there are giving symptoms of the sadhu, what is the absence of the sadhu, what learned men, what the learned man knows very well, that attachment for materials is the greatest entanglement. And then how do we behave? Engage constantly in chanting and hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The sadhus do not suffer from material miseries because it's always filled with lustful pastimes and activities. So, Kapila is now advising his mother. He advises his mother, Devahuti, that if she wants to be free from material attachment, she should increase her attachment for the sadhus, or devotees, who are completely freed from all material attachment. We can get a hint here that taking sadhus sangha, or association of devotees, is really important. But what kind of devotees? It's not just any devotees, but those who are completely freed from material attachment, those kind of devotees. In the next verse, it's also going to give another hint. So in the Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, verse 5, it is stated, who is qualified to enter into the kingdom of Godhead? And it said there, I'm just going to read that verse, that those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal and are done with material lust, who are free from dualities of happiness and stress, and who are unbewildered, know how to enter into the Supreme Person and attain to that eternal kingdom. So it said there is this Nir Mana Maha Jita Sangadosha. This refers to one who's completely free from the puffed up condition of material possessiveness. The person may be materially very rich, opulent, or respectable, but if he at all wants to transfer himself to the spiritual kingdom, back home, back to Godhead, then he has to be free from the puffed up condition of material possessiveness, because that is false position. So, puffed up is not something you hear so much in modern speech or vernacular, but it's rather graphically explains the condition of the living entity who is entangled. Due to disillusion, one is thinking, they know more than they know. And they may know a lot, but unless it's connected to Krishna, it's going to keep them also connected to the bewildering material energy. So The word moha used here means the false. Yeah. So the word moha used here means the false understanding that one is very rich or that one is rich or poor. In the material world, the conception that one is very rich or very poor, or any such consciousness in connection with material existence is false, because this body itself is false or temporary. In other words, it's false because it's temporary. There's no endurance to this material body. You know, we can look in the mirror and see our own faces. Those of us that are a little older, you can look in the mirror like when you're putting on your T-lock, and everyone's like, oh my God, whose face is that? We've seen that. Temporary. So in that respect, false. A pure soul who is prepared to be freed from this material entanglement must first of all be freed from the association of the three modes of nature. Our consciousness at the present moment is polluted because of association with the three modes of nature. And therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, the same principle is stated. It is advised, Jita Sangha Dosha, one must be freed from the contaminated association of the three modes of material nature. And here also, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is confirmed. A pure devotee who is preparing to transfer himself to the spiritual kingdom is also freed from the association of the three modes of material nature. So the last line in the verse, Sangha Parahadite, very important. We have to seek the association of such devotees. For this reason, we have begun the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. There are many mercantile, scientific, and other associations in human society to develop a particular type of education or consciousness, but there is no association which helps us to get free from all material association. If anyone has reached the stage where he must become free from this material contamination, then he has to seek the association of devotees, wherein Krishna consciousness is exclusively cultured. One can thereby become free from all material association. There was one devotee in the UK, and he has a society. This is part of his preaching strategy, and it's like really successful. A society dealing with consciousness. But all the textbooks are all Prabhupada's books. And these people are all kind of big-brained academics. They're attracted to it. People do want to know. So it's so amazing. Here we have all these problems, say big universities, but nobody's teaching this about consciousness. So very unique. And anyone in this room, including the youngest person here, has some concept and understanding of consciousness, which is a lot more than some big, huge professor who is completely obliterated. Basically, his consciousness is obliterated by attachment to his so-called temporary knowledge. So Prabhupada's created this ISKCON to correct this deficiency of not understanding what is consciousness, where is the source of consciousness, what is our relationship with our consciousness and the supreme consciousness. So because a devotee is freed from all contaminated material association, he's not affected by the miseries of material existence. Even though he appears to be in the material world, he's not affected by the miseries of the material world. And Prabhupada asked the question, how is that possible? There's a very good example in the activities of the cat. The cat carries her kittens in her mouth, And when she kills a rat, she also carries the booty in her mouth. Thus, both are carried in the mouth of the cat, but they are in different conditions. The kitten feels comfort in the mouth of the mother, whereas when the rat is carried in the mouth of the cat, the rat feels the blows of death. Similarly, those who are sadhaka are devotees engaged in Krishna consciousness in the transcendental service of the Lord, do not feel the contamination of material miseries, whereas those who are not devotees in Krishna consciousness actually feel the miseries of material existence. One should therefore give up the association of materialistic persons and seek the association of persons engaged in Krishna consciousness. And by such association, he will benefit in spiritual advancement. By their words and instructions, he will be able to cut off his attachment to material existence. So we can read and repeat. Oh, my mother. Oh, virtuous lady. So what was the word for in Sanskrit for the virtuous lady? Sati. These are the qualities of great devotees who are free from all attachment. We must seek attachment to such holy men. For this counteracts the pernicious effects of material attachment. So what does pernicious mean? Yes. Om Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishna Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Ramane Namaste Saraswati Devi Varamani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Prasvajana Satarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. This contrast. Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
I recently read a comment in the Chaitanya Chaitanya in the purport. Teachers who do not connect their students with the root source, Krishna, as did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, are considered disturbances, much as the horrible braying of an ass. So, at one point where Chaitanya went to Goya and he met his spiritual master, and he came back like a different person. It wasn't like before, because he's Christian himself, but in his role as a devotee, he was going through these transformations. So now he transformed full-on Krishna Bhakta, and everything's Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. And he was explaining everything in class, and his grammar was all related to Krishna. So root source Krishna, and so actually he was the perfect teacher. And I don't know if you ever heard an ass bray. It's the most god awful sound you'd never want to hear. We had this one in New Vrindavan. It was like across the street from the temple. When he opened his mouth, Oh God, that's dreadful. So finally they moved him up the road a bit, but it's so loud you can still hear it. So finally he got moved way up the road, up and on the ground. So there's a disturbance when the person is not being properly taught, what to speak of an entire society being misled. So and loads of goodness. One's knowledge expands. Then a platform of passion. There's no knowledge. Because this passion is simply an impetus to enjoy material benefits. And on the platform of ignorance, no, it's empty. On the platform of ignorance, there is no knowledge, there's no enjoyment. It's simply life, almost like that of animals. People nowadays, nowadays, even in my time, I hear a statement like that, no better than cats and dogs, and they're like, well, I wouldn't mind being a cat and a dog, and people are so foolish. I remember one time I thought it wouldn't be so bad to be a deer. I was running around, and I started feeling like, whiskers and deer horns, and then I was, at that point, I knew the word incarnation, but I had no understanding of the meaning. But when I was trying to be a deer, and I actually started feeling symptoms, it turned to freak me out, and I realized, no, this is not where you want to go, But simply to understand that one is not matter, but spirit, soul, that's not sufficient knowledge. It's his first step, but it's insufficient knowledge for understanding the self and the activities of the self, to speak of the activities in relationship with Krishna. So one must be perfectly situated in Brahman, and knowledge of these activities is explained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. So human beings, as opposed to animals, they're meant for a Reiki life. We are meant. Okay. I really feel guilty drinking water out of some more plastic. That's why I drink my thing that I can fill up. Anyway. If you see these pictures of the plastic pollution in the ocean and in our rivers and in our water, you might feel a little guilty also. And we have big watercolors and little paper cups and a trash bin to toss in them. So the human life is meant for a regulated life. This is something that, even animals will be regulated to go to sleep at a certain time to wake up. But their whole focus on, like, they wake up, where's food, and trans move over to the mating and then defending, fighting with each other. But we're meant for a regular life for which one understands transcendental knowledge. And it's here in the Srimad Bhagavatam that we find actual transcendental happiness. So the more that we hear, the more that we chant the glories of the Lord, the more we can become happy. Just like Maitreya and Vidura, even though Vidura was younger than Maitreya, Vidura was the superior. But out of etiquette, he was inquiring for Maitreya. And Maitreya was really pleased with them because why? They were inquiries of a bona fide advanced devotee, and that encouraged him to answer. So when there's discourses on transcendental topics between devotees of equal mentality, the questions and the answers are very fruitful and encouraging. So here is Vihuti, she's getting, inquiring from her transcendental son. It was commented in one of the purports that the eternal sensory activities are called devotional service. Eternal sensory activities. But the temporary or the external sensory activities, they are called sense gratification. And unless you're a fool, we want to avoid this terminology as being part of our activities in life. It's not like sense gratification is not part of our life. It is, but it's transcendental sense gratification. Just like when we eat prasadam, this is spiritual food, and we can actually get spiritual benefit just by honoring prasadam. That's why it's one of the important activities in Krishna consciousness, distributing the prasadam, distributing books, Harinam, Sankirtan, Devi worship, and festivals. All of these things are activities related to Krishna. So unless we get tired of sense gratification, there's no opportunity to actually hear the transcendental message from a person like Kapila. You may hear some sound, but the hearing is being referred to as a deeply imbibed message. That is transcendental hearing. So the spiritual master takes the disciple to the other side by opening his eyes with knowledge. And by the instruction of the spiritual master, here Kapila is instructing the mother. By the instruction of the spiritual master, the darkness of ignorance is removed, and the disciple can go to the side of freedom. So that, we have our eyes, but without the light of the sun, our eyes have no value, unless you have some artificial, we have these little things turn on, the flashlight, we have all our electrical things, but we require this to see. But without the light of the Supreme Lord, or without the divine grace of the spiritual master, we cannot see things as they are. Now, we're not talking about saying, okay, here's a red chair, or a blue car out there. That's not the as they are we're talking about. We're talking about the spiritual condition and position of the living entity. So as soon as the living entity forgets his real constitutional position of eternal servitorship to the Lord and wants to enjoy by sense gratification, which means the Lord is not part of that picture. What happens? You get captured by Maya. And this capture by Maya is the consciousness of false identification with the body and the attachment with the possessions of the body. And these are the activities of Maya. And because Maya is also an agent of the Lord, indirectly, it's an action of the Lord. And sometimes this confuses people, because we're saying avoid all this, avoid Maya. And at the same time, he's an agent of Krishna, which means indirectly, it's happening by Krishna's sanction. But, the understanding is given that he's merciful. Krishna's merciful. Anybody wants to forget him and enjoy the material world, he's in full facility. Not directly by himself, but through the agency of his material potency. That's Maya's job. So since the material potency is the Lord's energy indirectly, it's the Lord who gives the facility to forget him. But that's not his desire. He's just fulfilling our foolish desire. He's very merciful. So Devabhuti had said, my engagement in sense gratification was also due to you. Now kindly get me free from this entanglement. Very good request. Normally we're not making demands on the Supreme Lord, but this is a very good request, and from a sincere soul. The example was of the tree of material existence, which is explained in the 15th chapter of the Gita, this Ashwatha tree. Roots are upward, branches are downward. So it's recommended that one has to cut the root of this material existence, use material existence tree with the axe of detachment. So Devahuti got the perfect acts of detachment. He wanted to cut the premature entanglement to the suitable weapon. Her son Kapila Muni. The one who sincerely surrenders into the lotus feet of the Lord. Sorry, the Lord is so kind, he frees one from this entanglement. So he's saying, Krishna is telling us about the Gita. What does he say? First surrender, and I'll take charge of you, and I'll free you from all sinful activities. As soon as we forget this constitutional position, this eternal servitorship to the Lord, then we get captured by Maya Devi. I had written a letter to Srila Prabhupada trying to understand some of this, and I thought I would read his answer. And I started out with making some statements so you can see from what his replies, what I was saying. We should always think of ourselves as the most fallen, the most ignorant. And it is simply the mercy of Lord Chaitanya that we have even got the opportunity to serve Krishna. So nowadays, it's not popular to think, oh, don't think of yourself as the most fallen, the most ignorant. You know, that's just bring you down. It's not gonna make you happy. But actually, by thinking like that in connection with Krishna, if you just go around thinking I'm the most fallen, the most ignorant, but you're not connecting to Krishna, it can be pretty depressing. But they have medication for that, don't worry. But we have the perfect medication, and you don't even need a medical plan. You just get connected to Krishna, Lord Chaitanya. We have no qualification of our own. It's simply by the merciful plans. This is Prabhupada speaking to me here in this letter. Simply by the merciful plans of this most magnificent appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that we have been given the chance to serve Radha and Krishna. Your questions are very nice. Yes. The supersoul and the soul are both unchanged. The difference is that in the material contact, the soul appears to be changed. So we get all these different kinds of bodies, right? And still there's the soul, so it appears there's some change. But the supersoul is not affected by material contamination, and therefore there is no sign of change. The change of the soul is like that water becomes ice in contact with the refrigerator. As soon as there is the proper temperature, the ice again becomes water. And similarly, the changing nature of the soul is just like the change of water to ice. The tendency of ice is to melt and become water again. So due to contamination of matter, the soul by illusion identifies with material existence. But the tendency is to melt again into Krishna consciousness. So when there is sufficient temperature and contact with the bona fide spiritual master and devotees, the soul again becomes Krishna conscious, just like water. And interestingly enough, I found to say that this was in like 68. And on the same day, it was in November 68, like Prabhupada was very prompt in his replies. I had written him on the 15th of November, and then this came back, it was like 20-something, really quick. And on the same day, he wrote a letter to Shyam Sundar, who had also written to him. So our situation was that we were trying to get to this temple. We'd arrived in London. We still haven't had our Beatles aha moment, so we're struggling quite a lot. Just trying to keep up with life, and trying to keep up with our devotional activities, trying to find the temples of Prabhupada. And, it wasn't going as we had expected that it would go. And it was kind of like we had that fast food mentality, you give your order and there it is. And so we arrived in early September. So here it was, like maybe a couple months later, September, October, November, a couple months later, hey, where's our temple? So Prabhupada's, Shamsundar is sending some kind of lament to Prabhupada. We haven't been able to do this. So Prabhupada replies, I beg to acknowledge receipt of your letter dated November 14th, 1960, November 4th, 1968. Mine was a little later than that. The description of your letter reveals that you want to serve Krishna more and more. This is a good sign. Service of Krishna is so nice that one becomes enthusiastic to serve more and more. This is the nature of spiritual service. And then he acknowledges, I understand that because you cannot start a temple in London, you're feeling disappointed. There's no cause for such disappointment. I can understand you're doing very well, even though we've not got our own temple. And I said, some pictures, they comment, the pictures HG Malti has sent me are very nice. Many are very, very nice. From the pictures, I understand how sincerely you're working there. So even we cannot establish a temple, our preaching work is not going in vain, so there's no cause for disappointment. You go on with your work as you're doing, and everything will become successful in due course. And so there's some other words. The last sentence was, and pray to Krishna to please keep us always engaged in the service of Krishna's lotus feet. Krishna is very kind and he's never ungrateful, and he will give you more and more opportunities to serve him. That is his mercy. I hope this meets you all in good health. So the interesting thing, he's been twice, he was saying, alluding, don't worry, you will get the opportunity. Krishna will, become more enthusiastic. Krishna will give you opportunity to course of time. So this is November. So shortly thereafter, in early December, the fateful meeting with George Harrison occurred, and the great PK adventure began to unfold. So, in other words, it's our duty to follow the process, and when Krishna sees that's happening and he sees we're sincere, he's going to reciprocate. If we bail out, sometimes you feel, oh, it's so hard. And I'm always saying, it's so hard is not our mantra. Hare Krishna is our mantra. So, we persevered, pushed on, and then without even expecting what was going to happen, because by that time we were feeling like maybe this isn't going to happen. But we pushed on. We pulled on, as your T-shirt says. And which has a T-shirt, pull and be happy. And there's a picture of so we pulled on. And then all of a sudden, it happened. The arrangements were made, the doors were open. And Krishna must have been laughing at us at that point. He doubted me, well, here. You see this. So the spirit soul, everyone exists eternally. But the asat has accepted the material world as a shelter and therefore full of anxiety. It's a satgraham. The incompatible situation of the spirit soul who has a false idea of enjoying matter. Incompatible, That's the cause of this bewilderment. And actually, the spirit soul is not a sat. As soon as one is conscious of this fact, takes the Krishna consciousness, becomes satam gati. the path of the eternal. So, for people who are interested in this path, for his mother, if he was begin to speak about this eternal path. Well, in the material world, one cannot have this unadulterated happiness. So any kind of happiness here is like contaminated by distress. I was giving an example of drinking milk. Actually, that was like, this is 50 years ago, this purport. And now, like if you want to drink milk now, oh my God, there's so many arguments. What kind of milk? Plant-based, unhinged milk, So the Prabhupada gave, the story of that sage meditating. This unadulterated happy. You're trying to, so the sage is trying to be happy through his meditation. It gets bothered by, y'all know this one, right? The mouse. So solution, get a cat. The cat meow because he wanted to be fed. So okay, get a cow. Cow mooed because he wanted to be fed and milked. So what did he end up with? A wife. Yes. So there's always nothing against wives here. It's like, it was just like, it was how he was just trying to happily meditate, and so many things came up. So in a lecture in Seattle in November '68, Prabhupada was talking about the Vedic intention, this testimony mind of your Gamaha, don't remain in darkness, come to the light. And for this, a spiritual master is needed. It is the duty of the spiritual master to open the eyes of the person in darkness with the torchlight of knowledge. People should not be kept in darkness. They should be brought to the light. And yet, what is the whole goal of this modern civilization? Keep you in darkness. I mean, I'm not trying to get political, but that's what governments do. Otherwise, how can they control people? To keep you involved, in darkness with their false narrations and their false information, And the last thing they're going to do is to tell you how to get out into the light. Because that means you wouldn't accept these people as your Lord and Master government heads anymore. So the problem is in every human society, but still people should be brought to the light. So therefore, in every human society, there is a religious institution of some sort. And the purpose, it doesn't matter, what is the purpose? Hinduism, Mohammedanism, Christianity, or Buddhism, it's to bring people to the light. That's the purpose of religion. And what is the light? That light is the supreme personality of Godhead. But unfortunately, in every moment, in every state, every society, people are trying to forget God, and the government's trying to force you to forget God one way or the other. You can actually get arrested in some places in America for speaking up about God. That's how bad it is. So some people will publicly say there is no God, and so on, or and we've got this so-called advanced civilization. When you drive up here, and we started out in Athens. Well, we started in Vrindavan, went to Columbus, went down to Athens, came up here, we spent the day and night in Toledo. We were driving through to get to up here, Michigan. You have to drive through this really depressing atmosphere of factories and rotten, falling down houses and falling down factories. And it's not just one or two, it's vast expanses of it. Contaminated, polluted water reservoirs. Forgetting that the real advancement is dependence on Krishna. So the Prabhupada he explained it. Precarious, it's a very precarious condition in human society right now. And then he said, he gave another nice story. What happens to society when they forget the personality of Godhead? So This is more of a parable that once there was a rat being troubled by what would trouble a rat? A cat, right? So the rat went to a saintly person who also had mystic powers, and he's saying, "Sir, I'm in very much trouble." "Oh, what's the difficulty?" "A rat." The rat says, "The cat always chases me. I have no peace of mind. So what do you want?" "Please make me a cat." "All right, become a cat." A few days later, the cat comes to the saintly person. "My dear sir, I'm in trouble." "Oh, what is that trouble?" "The dogs are chasing me." "Oh, what do you want?" "Make me a dog." "All right, become a dog." And then after a few days, the dog comes back. Guess what? He's in trouble. "What's the trouble?" "The foxes are chasing me." "Then what do you want?" "To become a fox." "All right, become a fox." And then the fox comes back. "Oh, the tigers are chasing me. What do you want?" "I want to become a tiger." "All right, become a tiger." And the tiger sat there staring intensely at this saintly person. The saintly person so that he can understand. "Oh, you want to eat me?" "Yes, I want to eat you." "Oh," he said, "I have made you a tiger and now you want to eat me?" "Yes, I'm a tiger, so now I'll eat you." And what did that saintly person do? Again, became a rat. Baba. Tiger became a rat. So our human societies like this, we develop, we just keep trying to rearrange the situation until we study this thing, we study that thing, but we ignore the real thing. We'll wait till we get older, and it's for the old people, right? For lots of friends, for a lot of 5 years old, we will enjoy it. Who knows? So if we develop our love of God to the fullest extent, we become a perfect person, and we'll feel perfection within ourselves. Actually, we're hankering after full satisfaction, but this full satisfaction is not, of course, if you're eating prasada, full satisfaction is understood. But I mean, if we really want full satisfaction, it's obtained by loving God. It's a natural function of every living entity. Doesn't matter whether you're Christian, Hindu, Mohammedan, just trying to develop love of God. And then Prabhupada said, then your religion is very nice. Otherwise, the activities is Stramahiva Kevalam, simply waste of time. So he was explaining, if after you're executing rituals in a particular type of religion or even some kind of, weird concocted practice throughout your whole life, and you have no love of God, then we've simply wasted our time. So he described the Krishna consciousness movement as postgraduate movement of all kinds of religion. And Prabhupada said, we're inviting all Christians, Muslims, Hindus, everyone, please come and associate with us and try to love God. The method is very simple. Just chant the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. But the fact that Prabhupada would openly beg people, come, invite people, come associate with us and try to love God. What does that mean? It means we ourselves have to be lovers of God. We have to make this a priority. People are going to come. And if they don't see this in us, then they won't stay. So we may not be on the highest level, but once you start and you take the steps, just like these young kids here, they're taking the steps. So it's very attractive. And then there's every opportunity from the smallest to the oldest to take to this practice of Krishna consciousness and actually become satisfied. And if we're not feeling some level of satisfaction, then we have to, take a little pause and make sure that we are following the instructions of the bona fide spiritual master, at least Prabhupada. Because he said many times, I guarantee you this process works. And if we look at our life, we will see it may not be full-on self-realization yet, but certainly there's got to be a level of realization that you've achieved since you first walked into the door. You can't go on chanting, even if your chanting is not without offense, is with offense, or without offense. It's going to have some effect, not the full. It's kind of like, okay, you're out of gas, like we're almost out of gas, so we're going to stop at a gas station. Now we can put a drop of gas in. It'll have some effect, but really we need a full tank, a fuller tank. In the same way, we need to fill ourselves with Krishna consciousness activities, with Krishna, and these activities are not only limited to the ones we being the temple cook, or taking care of Tulsi. Prabhupada is really clear. Whatever you do, Krishna's very clear. Whatever you do, make it as an offering to me. At one point, Sasru Maharaj was thinking to quit his job because Parmijan Gopal Krishna before he was Swami, thinking to quit his job. And Prabhupada, it wasn't in favor of that. Because you're serving Krishna. They weren't keeping the money for Sanskrit. Of course, neither were married at the time, but the money was being used to pay the rent of the temple. And they quit their jobs, they were put in a precarious situation. So there's nothing that can't be done for Krishna so long as the consciousness is switched on to Krishna. So you have to flip the switch, just like we flip the switch, turn off the lights. So how do we flip our switch? Just through chanting Hare Krishna, associating with devotees who are actively engaged in Krishna consciousness, and engaging ourselves in devotional activities, and always chanting the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare. And just fill ourselves. Did anybody hear that class on Swami gave on Guru Praying? I haven't heard it, but I've heard about it. But he was pointing out that if you're having trouble chanting, it's because you filled yourself with other things, the asat, the temporary things. And then there's a competition. You're trying to add Krishna, and we're all filled up with these other things that are pushing back. Our senses are pushing back. So we have to take the time, take the energy, take the determination, and be enthusiastic about it, and also be patient in the matter of developing Krishna consciousness. So, Hare Krishna. Anybody wants to make comments or corrections?
Very, very wonderful insight, very wonderful point which you shared. I don't have a question, but I was just thinking about the beautiful points which you shared. I like the point which you talked about the ice and water.
Yeah.
It was very, very touching, very wonderful example. I also personally like the letter which you read from Srila Prabhupada, that you always have to look at the better aspects of Krishna consciousness, not just live in our own world. That's what I took it as that way. But that was a wonderful point.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, in this letter, he said, it's your good fortune that you can serve Krishna in so many ways. To work, to write, to speak, to paint, to build. All of these talents must be employed in Krishna service. And that will make you perfect. We went on to say, we're so fortunate to have this human form of life and have the opportunity and capacity to serve Krishna. And as there's very little time, we must do as much as possible each day to serve Krishna and become always engaged in thoughts and activities of Krishna. Hare Krishna.
I have one question. You said we keep trying to rearrange situations in life and we try to fix material problems. And while we're doing that, we miss the point of Krishna consciousness. So my question is, how do we like stop ourselves from trying to rearrange material situations?
You know, of course, Krishna gives us intelligence, and he also gives us common sense. Both must be used. You know, sometimes you have to, you do have to do some adjustments. Like, hey, let's say, just like one devotee was telling me today, he wasn't feeling well, like, he was saying, oh, this was their class was actually the doctor. That's, what you should do. That's also Krishna service. Sometimes there has to be adjustments because otherwise there's impediments. Ultimately there's no impediment. But let's just say, somebody in a car, he drives over your foot and he stops the car that's on your foot. Common sense is kind of moving, So use your intelligence. Krishna gave it to you. And it's not that we can't do anything. That's the point. What Prabhupada was also making for Krishna. So if you're finding yourself in some direction, attracted in some direction, you might consider is how can I use this to serve Krishna, whatever that attraction may be. If I see you ladies have an attraction for dancing, but then I see you dancing here with the pleasure of Radha Gopis and Vallabha, The main thing is engage your intelligence. When it comes to trying, something's not working, engage your intelligence. Because that's what Krishna gave it to you for. Okay. Thank you very much. I suspect right now there's another mantra that's going in your mind. The famous one, so thank you very much. The day after Akadashi is already an enthusiastic day for Krishna. Hare Krishna.
HG Malti Prabhu ki
Jai.
When people are enthusiastic after class, thank God it's done. I mean, even if Prabhupada's tired, we kind of, myself, and somebody was thinking about this one time, and she listened to the tapes, and suddenly, you're so resistant.
Immediately sanctions, even though some desires that are not.
He's saying to Maya's, like, he's not saying, okay, you go and do this. But Maya, you wanted to do it. Maya's saying, I mean, but his preference is you.